Well, Alessa, thank you so much for joining me here today on The Ripple Effect with Ray. So excited to have you here and to learn more about JōbuFIT and how you got started. Thanks for being
Yeah,
here.
thank you so much for having me. I am an open book. Ask away. What do you want to talk about?
Well, firstly, tell me the inspiration. Tell me why and how you got started with your company.
What I typically tell people is what I do and what I teach is this like amalgamation, this kind of thing that is little bits of me throughout my life, kind of like rolled together. Think of like me rolling down a hill and kind of picking up things as I go. That's what I tell people. I was raised in a family of doctors, and so medical terms were used. It was never just, like my leg bone, it was my femur. So those kinds of terms, when something hurt, it wasn't enough to just say, oh, the top of my leg hurts. And my father was like, well, what hurts exactly? And it would be one of those like, well, your quad has four parts, and then become a teaching thing, and then you'd know about that. So the next time something happened, because I grew up dancing as well, and so it was always a next time. It's always something that was, growing pains and strains. And as I grew up in dancing, all over the US and then internationally as well, dancing 20 plus hours a week into my high school, which then led me to get my BA in dance, really kind of took that sciency, what I thought was normal at home, with the combination of the artistry piece. And so when I went to university and I talked like that, I used those words when describing body positioning and expressing myself through my choreography and using technical, what I didn't know were, technical medical terms and anatomical terms, not even like technical terms, really, just parts of your body. People would look at me like I had five heads. And that was always a kind of okay, let me take a step back here because this isn't normal. Like I'm not normal in this way. And that only made me more interested in learning how we actually work, because I started realizing people around me who depend on this amazing machine, that their human body, for their, their livelihood, their artistry, to convey themselves. When I was seeing that around me and realizing that these people don't know how it actually works, that was just a like, what? Like you're using this is your livelihood, whether you were dancing or a professional athlete or an Olympian or whatever your day required of you, even if it is sitting in front of technology. You only get one body, there are no trade-ins. And so that really, at that point, I was like, I really want to know everything there is to know about this amazing machine. And from a very young age, I started using anatomy flashcards. That was my kind of like before go to bed kind of point. I know I'm a giant nerd, I tell everybody that. And then I finished university. I graduated and I moved back east to New York City, and I thought I was going to dance and twirl around on stage forever. And by the end of the summer, I ended up breaking my foot in just a total freak accident. I stepped off of a rock and I was on the beach and I twisted a bone in my foot, and didn't go back. And then I had about 8 months of not being able to wear like anything but rain boots and sneakers, just because my foot wouldn't fit in there. And it took a toll mentally and physically on me. And I couldn't dance, couldn't go to auditions, couldn't do the things that I had dreamed of doing. But my parents saw it, and my mom was like, you know what? I think that you should get certified in Pilates. When I was younger and I had injuries, I used Pilates to heal injuries, because it was, dancing, you needed to have the long and the strong and be able to be your flexible self. And so at that point my mom was like, you need to do something, like you can't just sit here. I had little jobs that were artist adjacent, but it wasn't fulfilling. And so I got a Pilates certification. And like I said, I'm a giant nerd, so I just kept going. I was hired by the studio that certified me because I started just taking certification after certification. So I started teaching other people who wanted to become Pilates instructors. And so I was teaching them to become Pilates instructors. And I quickly learned that wasn't really for me. I really wanted to affect people and help people directly have better days and heal injuries and be stronger and longer. So that was a very brief moment. When I was injured, my foot was still not so great. This is like such a cliche. My now husband walked into a bar, and it was the rest is history. And we moved across the world, and we moved to Japan. And I had, via our honeymoon, we moved to Japan, and he gifted me a Pilates reformer, which is like the big machine that you work out on. And I opened the first to the island Pilates studio in Japan. And so I was able there to train Marines, sailors, soldiers, airmen, stay-at-home moms, DoD professionals, including locals there. And that was an amazing experience. I trained people, taught me a lot about business and how to, customer service and the more like finances side of things that you need to run a business. But it also showed me that it didn't matter what these bodies did for work in their professional lives, they all had the same complaints. By lunchtime, the hip pain, the back pain, just the little aches of their day started creeping in. By 3 p.m., their energy was tanked. They had no more anything, even though they were sleeping 8 hours a day, they were eating correctly, they were doing all the things that, the health things that we're taught from childhood. And that's when I had like another light bulb moment. And I was like, there has to be something better than this. We didn't, because they didn't all sit in front of a computer. Some of them were underneath airplanes and fixing airplanes. Moms are running around all day, chasing after children and doing house chores and, managing their families. And still they were tired, and it wasn't sitting in front of a computer. So it didn't matter what these people, how they used their machine. They were all getting, just worn down and exhausted. And one morning it occurred to me, I'd seen this every morning when I was out walking my dog in Japan. Like we have street lamps in the US, they have street lamps with speakers. And while I was out walking my dog, I would hear this music play. And every morning I would see the music would play. And it didn't matter your age, didn't matter what you did for a living, didn't matter if you were retired. Everybody stops. They line up. I was walking my dog on the seawall, and I would see the construction workers and the retired old lady tie her dog, to the little street lamp. She'd line up with the construction workers, and they all have this awakening kind of stretching routine that they did every day. And for a few months of talking to my clients who are all struggling in the same ways, and then having this light bulb moment, I realized that this could be the something that teaching people that you don't need to sweat to be healthy, teaching people that you don't need an hour plus workout to be healthy, and focusing on your mobility. Now, I'm also not here to replace your workouts. I know there are people out there that love their HIIT morning classes, that love their evening Pilates classes, that need that like half marathon run every weekend. I'm not here to take that away from you, but there's little things and little adjustments that you can make within your day that are minutes at a time that can help you and get rid of that aches and pains in your body, get rid of the stress, fatigue, anxiety, all of the things that come at you during your workday. And so by seeing that and kind of seeing the light bulb situation and moving back to New York and having all of these experiences by talking to companies, because that's what I ended up doing when I first started. I was like, hey, can I just come in and talk? You don't have to pay me. I just want to see how people would react to this. If people want this, if they're open to something like movement in their workspace. And when I started seeing people making these small changes that I was just talking about, it was like multiple light bulbs going off. They were having better work days. They wanted more ways of more things that they can do. They wanted more tips on how to get more movement within their workspace, their chair desk tech setup. And that's really, it's what I do and what I teach has changed over the years. That I've been doing this for almost about 10 years now. But that's what it boils down to, is helping hardworking bodies reduce aches and pains and stress, and really just be able to walk out of their workday whenever they can close that computer and feel like they can engage with their friends. They can have energy to go home and sit down and have dinner with their family, and that they're not mentally and physically exhausted because they had to work all day long.
Thank you, Alyssa, for like highlighting that, sharing that. And I think it is just so resonant for our world today. So many people I talk to that are in their corporate jobs, they finish the day, they are drained, they are exhausted, they don't have energy to be present with their families. And, it's like a rinse repeat process,
Yeah,
right?
it's that energy, the word like no, you can't really like put like there's no like this is the problem. Just people the biggest thing that I get is I am just exhausted. And there is not a it's not like a I'm exhausted because XYZ happened because XYZ doesn't happen every day. But the idea of just finishing your day and like just not wanting to socialize, just wanting to like sit in your car and, like repower, like like have whatever it is. And that kind of because it's not tangible, because it's not like oh, my hip hurts, right? Or, oh, my shoulder hurts. So I can fix those things too. And I do, and that's part of what I teach is we fix the shoulder pain, we fix the posture, we fix the hip pain, fix the back pain, because that will help you have that energy. But the number one complaint I get is that I'm just done. I'm drained at the end of my workday. And that is something that really, that's been the key piece when talking to people is being able to convey doing these steps, the things that I teach will help you. And, so that you can, go home and be present with your family, because that's a huge thing.
Such a huge thing. And what I actually noticed too, and you think you kind of touched on it on the culture of Japan, and I even had a friend coming to visit from Europe, and he observed, he's like, why do Americans sit in their cars? Like, he's like, it's like such a interesting point you made. Like, he's like, I've just noticed like all these Americans, they just sit in their cars. Like, what are they doing? Why are they just sitting in like a running car? And I think it really ties back to it's like I think that's our way to almost like recharge in a way
Yeah.
before like, going into the next thing. But what if we could actually like diagnose that or get to the root cause of that like before that even happens so that we don't necessarily, I mean, it not right or wrong, right? It's totally fine that people do that, but it's almost like, well, why are people doing that, right? And
Yeah.
how do we fix that?
Yeah. And honestly, it's not you're not going to find the solution and then every day is going to be perfect, right? It's definitely with health and especially with interpersonal relationships. There are going to be good days, there's going to be bad days, there's going to be awful days, and then there's going to be fantastic days where, you finish your day and you're like, today was amazing. Everyone was helpful and all the pieces came into place. And though that like ebb and flow does exist. So I'm not here to say like, if you follow these steps, you'll have consistently, happy and everything's going to be sunshine and daisies. Like that's not the goal. The goal is to say, okay, I'm not feeling energized. I'm feeling stressed. Anxiety is creeping in right now. What can I do so that I can stop that, right? I call it the downward stress spiral. So that when you can recognize those things in your day, you can put a stop to it so that you can pivot and then have a better day than what would have happened if you didn't acknowledge it and didn't address it at that point. Because people constantly tell me, I just have to make it to Friday. Then over the weekend, everything's going to be fine. And it may be, but that's a pretty awful way to manage your week. Can you imagine like, okay, I'm great on a Monday, I'm okay on a Tuesday, that hump day Wednesday, I'm just done. And then on the end, like on the Thursday and the Friday, just I'm just going to push through, and then you find yourself sitting in your car and not going in and engaging with your friends and your family because you're just done.
Yeah, 100%. And so for somebody that's listening to this right now, maybe they're listening to this during their workday, they're going through the phases of anxiety. What is something that they could do in this moment?
So there's a couple of things that I teach. It depends on what's happening. So I talk about the downward stress spiral, and stress anxiety starts in one of two ways. It either starts physically or it starts mentally. So if it's starting physically, what typically happens, right, when we are getting our work done, we think, okay, let me just like get closer to my computer because then I can get that email done faster. I don't know what it is, but people think like if I get in, my neck is forward, my shoulders come up, and if I get like closer to my tech, it'll all be easier, right? And they kind of push through. And when that happens and you're sitting there, you're like, oh, let me just finish this, but oh, my shoulder is hurting, or oh, my back muscles are starting to tighten up because I'm in this like really awkward position. And that is stress manifesting physically, right? That's how it starts. Now, if it starts in more of a emotional way, typically you're on a long Zoom call, it goes, your digital meeting goes from 9 to 10, it's 10:20, you're still not done, people aren't giving you actionables, you're starting to say like, I have other things to do, I'm starting to think about all my to-do list, and that's when the mental side of things comes in. Now, when you don't acknowledge the physical or mental problem at that point, it will become the opposite. So for example, if you're getting closer to your computer and you're like, I'm going to get this email done, you start to think, okay, my shoulder hurts, my back hurts. Let me just finish this email so that way, then I will take a break. I'll earn my break. And what happens there? The shoulder pain then becomes oh my goodness, I need to get this done because then becomes a mental thing. And then you lean in closer and then the shoulder hurts even more. And then your knee starts to bounce and you have all of these physical goes to the mental that then goes back to the physical and then it starts to spiral. And the same thing happens with the mental side of things. So when you're on that digital call and you start to stress out because it's going too long and you start to think about all the things that are on your to-do list, what happens then? Very typically, people start to do the knee bounce, they start to do the pen chew, they start to do things that are physically going to start stressing them, right? When you have that mental stress then becomes physical because it's starting to manifest physically. And then the cycle repeats it. And that's why I call it the downward stress spiral, because it goes back and forth. And that's why you have to cut it off at the start. So getting back to your question, I'm sorry, I kind of went on a little side tangent there. You catch yourself and you're in that hunched position, or you catch yourself and you're starting to stress chew on your pen. I tell people to push yourself back, reach your arms up, make yourself as big as you possibly can, stretch everything long so that you can acknowledge your body. One thing I really love is specific muscle tension. The dancer in me comes back. This is a very like modern, postmodern technique, which is really great to kind of put yourself back into your body. So I tell people the easiest thing to do is to extend your hands all the way long and then just acknowledge your hands. The other thing too is to hold for a count of 5, make a fist, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You can add your breath in there if you like to breathe through things, and then release and shake it out. Because then what you're doing is you're taking your attention and you're putting it to something that you can actually see, into your hands, and then you can release and let it go. Now, if the stress is beginning in mental and it's coming at you and you're thinking about your to-do list, what I tell people to do is to push away from their computer as well and take your eyes off of the thing that's stressing you out. Look out the window, look at pictures on your desk of loved ones, remember a vacation that you had that was loving, that was relaxing, that you really enjoyed, that you have fond memories of. And then that way it'll really put everything into perspective, saying, okay, this is why I'm doing this. I have a family. I really love my career. I'm going to achieve this today, even though it's not going as planned. And then what you can do is, once you like acknowledge the physical or the mental stress, I do suggest doing the opposite. So if you have that if you have that physical stress and you do that specific muscle tension and then you shake it out, go for a walk the perimeter of your workspace, look at something that is actually in real life, because that will help you. And the same thing for the mental. If you start by looking around and okay, I'm taking my blood pressure down, I'm breathing now more relaxed, same thing, go reheat that cup of coffee for the 5th time that you haven't finished today, and while the microwave is going, do a couple of squats, do them in 3 different positions, and when it bings, then you take your coffee, you can sit down, you can drink your coffee, hopefully away from the computer screen. And when that's done, it's a definite end. And then you can go back to work. So that way you're taking care of both the mental aspect of things and you're taking care of the physical aspect of things, but it doesn't matter how it starts.
100%. And I think it's so important to acknowledge the being present with what you're doing.
Yeah.
And, even you saying like, okay, go take a break, go heat up your coffee, but then drink your coffee away from your desk,
Yeah.
right? I think so many times we bring our coffee to our desk, we bring our food to our desk.
Well, the
We,
side gets cold, right? Like, your lunch doesn't get finished because you're thinking about something else. The one thing I will say though is when you do take a break, you have to be strict with yourself because a lot of times that's when people pick up their phones and they start going like this, and then they look up and it's an hour later, and then that causes them more stress because they haven't gotten their to-do list done. So you have to be aware of this is my rest time and this is my work time. And so when I create frameworks for people, like when I go in and I actually give this talk, I talk about working in a 50-10 ratio. So within a clock hour, so for every 45 to 50 minutes that you spend with like really focused, committed work, like no distractions, at that, if you can't make it to the 50 mark, because that's all most people say I can get to 45, but the last 5 minutes is where I start to kind of go off a little bit. And I say, fine, pause, and then go for a walk, go up and down a flight of stairs, do a couple of squats. You can run under your desk, right? Or you can like journal it out. I love the idea of journaling. I'm starting to see people coming back to it, especially when I bring it up. But like 5 years ago, they're like, write stuff down. No, I'm not going to do that. Just take a few minutes. But that's the big thing is that when you do take that break, to actually be strict with yourself and get back to actual focused work. Because that's the biggest kind of I've created unwanted stress, unnecessary stress in my day is when I'm not following my own guidelines.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. And a lot of times we need to take our own medicine,
Yeah.
right? We can talk to people all
Yeah.
day long and tell them, hey, you need to go do this, or like it would be great if you like did some squats, but then so many times us as the entrepreneur, we're like, no, we need to get everything done in a day. And
Yeah.
it just starts to pile up. And you're like, oh my God, I haven't actually gotten up from my desk and it's been like 3 hours. Uh,
Yes. I have on my watch, I set it so that I have the 50 minutes and then I just swipe down and I tap and then I have a 10-minute timer. For me, a lot of like what I do, like when I'm giving a talk, it is a lot of movement, right? Because I have another camera that I set up that's from a distance that we do end up moving. So I'm a little bit of like a lot of what I do is showing physical. So like you can't quite go off of what I'm talking about, but I think it's really funny because I do conversations like this, podcasts or talk, and people then say, well, this is all great information, but how do you stay healthy? I'm like, this is what I do. Like when I'm not giving a talk, why do you think I teach this? Is because I know it works because I've used it on myself and I've tried all sorts of things. And people send me their new digital programs. I don't know if you've seen any of these like productivity like programs where like you can set the clock within the program and you can when you stick with your schedule you get like a new thing for the room that you're designing or creating, and you can put the like to-do list on one side and the sun. And then so I'm like, okay, I'll give this a try. I spend more time trying it than actually getting my work done. So people send me stuff like this all the time. I honestly, I just like a simple timer. You can use your phone if you can stay away from your phone. Cause I know some people like once they have, they tap the phone, that's it. They start like doing 50 other things, or just getting a simple like clock to tap it down, and you set up your own thing. I love having my watch and making it really simple for me to do it that way. You have to find something that works for you. And the simplest way that I have found is working in the 50-10 ratio.
Well, yeah, and I think it's so important. I love that you practice what you preach. I think that's super important. And I don't know if people are going to be listening to this on the audio versus the video, but you can definitely tell just from like sitting across the screen from you that like you are genuinely just like
Thank you.
be like a genuine, authentic person. So it really shows. And I think if only more people adopted and realized how important just even a little bit of movement, we would be in such a better place as a society and not and being actually present with what is needed from us, right?
Oh, definitely. A little extra here because as cliche as it sounds, I feel like this is a catchphrase, for lack of a better term, that a lot of people use. If you don't use it, you'll lose it. And it's a real thing. When I go in offices and I sit at long tables and give these talks to people who are, around the table, and I'm at the top of the table, and I'll talk for about 15 minutes and I say, okay, well, now let's do it. Because we want to make sure that you can leave here with at least 5 things that you can do in your workspace. And yeah, some of them are in, some men are in jackets, or women, are in their blazers, and that does restrict movement. But I can't tell you the amount of people who don't have, restrictive clothing on, and their arms only go to this. Like they cannot get their elbows above their head, and they don't stretch anymore. And even just for that simple fact that at, mid 40s and you can't stretch your arms long, something is wrong there. Like that is one of the, you don't think of that, you don't think that that happens to people until they're in like their 70s or 80s, right? You don't think about that, but it really does happen younger and younger, when they're sitting in front of their computers like this all day long, and their body is never required, to throw their arms up, or they're not rolling down and touching their toes, or doing a lunge, or even just walking with a proper gait. And people start to shorten their gait, that then goes away. That the stability there, is, once it's gone, it's gone. Like that's it. You have to, I mean, it would take a lot to get it back. But yes, that I hate to sound so doom and gloom. That turns into a very negative statement. But my point is use it so you don't lose it. That's where I was going with this.
Absolutely. No, I don't think it was too doom and gloom, but I think it's a very true fact that we don't necessarily take enough time to realize, like, hey, if you're doing the same thing day in, day out and not changing any sort of your behavior, what do you think is going to happen? Right.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah.
like, if nothing's changing, if you're staying in this, what we call quote unquote comfort zone, it's
Oh yeah.
actually can be quite uncomfortable, uh, like long term, right? We
Yeah,
have to
for
do things
sure.
that might feel a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe you're stretching your body that it hasn't stretched in a while, but we need to do that. And it's just like those little tiny micro nudges, micro changes that actually create a big change in our lives. And so with JōbuFIT, what would you say is like the dream? Where do you see this growing in the next couple of years?
Well, so that's a very interesting question. I've always, as an entrepreneur, I've always sought out mentors. And for no particular reason, I've always had women mentors for no particular reason. Within the last year, I started working with my first male mentor, and it has been a big shift for me if we're talking business now, because I pitch myself to companies. I go and talk with these companies. Sometimes I get a 3 talk kind of contract that I'll do over a year. Sometimes it's just a one, big conference thing. And I have a bunch of different ways that I share my message. I have like health interruptions, where I'll just go into different rooms in offices, and I talk for 5 minutes in each room, and I'm there for 3 or 4 hours, because I just keep going from room to room to room. Or I do, the traditional keynote speaking kind of thing. And a lot of the time, what happens is people, when I'm in these offices, I very frequently get my next job. Like someone says, like, oh, you have to go to my sister's company, she needs this. And it's usually mid management, mid upper management. And I'll go in and I'll do these talks, and people love it. And then I get kind of this at first, they're really energized, they really want to do this stuff, and then they start doing this stuff, but then the upper management starts saying, like, well, what are you doing? Like, why is this happening? Because very frequently they're not in these talks. They don't come to see and listen to how to change your work days. So that has been kind of an a unforeseen kind of piece to the puzzle here, because everything, like in anything, right, it trickles down from the top. Like with any kind of business, you set your culture from the top down. And if the top person there, or the top couple of people, I don't want to put it all on one person, because that sounds really awful too, don't understand that, your brain body connection, the stress and anxiety, and how to quickly get beyond that. And they just see a bunch of people that say, every hour I'm going to walk around my workplace for 10 minutes, and they say, like, well, why aren't you working? Like, but in all actuality, it's making them more healthy. So I lay all of this out because I can't take full credit for this. This has always been something that I've like, oh, well, I always talk to the manager or something, but they're not typically there. But my mentor was like, I think you need to start putting a program together for the decision makers and something that's very specific, very one-on-one. And so that's what I've started doing. And that's where I think I'm going to, I'm not going to, I'm here for every hardworking body. I do a lot of the talks. I'm going to continue going in and into offices and doing the talks, and whoever's going to have me, I am more than happy to go in and share my message, because I do believe that any person that works with the computer for 8+ hours a day deserves movement. But I really think that it's a cultural shift that has to happen from the top down. And so that's my goal, is to start creating almost kind of like a bespoke 2-3 day interaction with these people, with these decision makers, the higher ups, so that way my goal is to show them what they can do, that so it doesn't change their days, but it affects their days only positively, and then be able to say, well, then here's how you can bring it to everyone who works for you, so that your whole company can become more productive. And really, it cuts down on illness. Presenteeism is a really big, like fun workplace, catchphrase that no one seems to have a problem. No one seems to have a solution for the problem. A huge way to solve that problem is to get people moving, so that they don't have this like zombie like mentality while sitting in front of their workspace. So that's where I'm going at this point. That's where my focus is at this point. And just really launching, I haven't decided yet, 5 or 6 people. I've started doing outreach to like really to big decision makers within companies, to see if we can kind of make a push for them to, to start changing their minds and have, better work days, so that they can then pass it along to their employees.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that, Alessa. And where and how can people find you? How can people hire you?
The best place to contact me is actually LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn all the time. I see most of those messages. You can also go to like any social media. I get messages there all the time. You get, I feel like I get a little bit more spammy there. So I have to kind of sift through things. And so that's why I tell people to go to LinkedIn, because I will catch it. Sometimes I do miss messages that are on other places. So on all social media, I'm Alessa.Caridi. That's my handle. Facebook, I'm at JōbuFIT. I mean, my website, you can go to JōbuFIT.com as well. There's a contact page on there. That's definitely, but I feel like people really just want to connect with you more on social media. So LinkedIn is definitely the best place to get directly to me.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for today's conversation. It's been such a pleasure to have you on, and I very much look forward to hearing what our listeners have to say. Thanks for being here on The Ripple Effect with Ray.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for sharing your platform. I appreciate it.